Hello, and welcome to today's presentation brought to you by the Life Sciences team here at RegTech. Today's presentation is Ask the Experts, Critical Steps in Implementing Your MDR IVDR Plan. We are so pleased to introduce our panelists for today's talk. Gary Sainer is a subject matter expert on unique medical device identification and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. He has served as co-chair of the industry structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the medical devices group. Tommy Rocheholt is a medical device senior consultant, project manager, and owner at Rocheholt Consulting. He's a subject matter expert in UDI analysis, its strategy, and implementation, specializing in labeling and end-to-end processes, regulatory master data, and traceability standards implementation. He employs a holistic approach to UDI implementation, streamlining regulatory complexity into compliant and operational solutions. In this installment of our The Expert series, we will cover 12 critical steps in planning and executing your MDR IVDR strategy, best practices and errors to avoid, compliance timing deadlines, and lessons learned. This meeting is being recorded for future reference, and all audience members are muted. However, we encourage questions from the audience, which can be submitted at any time using the question box. We will try our best to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A session at the end. If you're facing any audio issues, you can also try calling the phone number mentioned in the email invite or on the screen by clicking the phone icon. After this live presentation, the slides and video link will be sent to all registrants. I'm Sam Page. I'm marketing manager for medical devices here at RegTech. Please feel free to contact me directly for any questions following this presentation. At this point, I will hand the mic over to Tommy and Gary. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Looks like we have a pretty full deck of topics to go through. And I do have to commend you, Sam. I don't know how you did it, but just a few days ago, Friday last week, there was some major changes to the timing of UDIMED. So we had to make some updates to our presentation to accommodate that. So we'll be talking about that. And the good part of the conversation today will be some experiences and lessons that Tommy and I have collected over the years on UDI. So we're going to work our way through some high-level steps. We don't have sufficient time to go into a lot of detail on each one, but as we step our way through, we'll add some commentary, some comments about what's good, what's bad, what has worked, and try to make that as beneficial as possible. Just to level set everyone, I have to believe everybody's familiar with the topic, the medical device regulation and the in vitro diagnostic regulation. But just in the event you have not been watching, this particular topic for the last couple of years, the existing directives in the European Union, 3 of which are now replaced by 2 regulations. So we have the medical device regulation and the in vitro diagnostic regulation that we're talking to. In some cases, the requirements are different, and where we have time and reason to go into those differences, we'll highlight that during the course of this conversation. But this was a real game changer. The regulations pretty much cleared the table, put a new framework in place. There's a number of bullet items over there. We'll leave that for homework, but basically all the notified bodies need to be redesignated. All the products need to be re-registered. There was a lot of information that needed to be collected and held in place, revamps to the quality management systems. UDI was certainly part of this revamp to identify products in a uniform fashion. So as a manufacturer, there was a number of things that you need to do. Consider, what are the time constraints? What are your resource constraints? How are you going to get this done? Do you have to make infrastructure changes? Getting the sufficient technical documentation in place and so on, and collecting data and so on. Now, Tommy and I were talking about how we would work our way through this, and we elected to use the 12-step fact sheets that you're able to access from the European Commission. So these 12, these were sourced from the Commission. But what we would like to do is kind of touch on each one of those. Some of them will go in a little bit deeper detail and provide a lot more, information and some comments about those particular items. So we'll work our way through those 12, stopping at a couple places along the way with a lot more detail. And when you go into these particular to-do items, these 12 steps, many times you'll find that there's a whole bunch of sub-items, in this case, sub-projects that go inside your implementation plan. So if you have not started to plan out your strategy and understand what needs to be done and just kind of get a lay of the land and the roadmap going forward, I would hope that most in the audience have already started down this pathway, and they might be using this particular webinar as a check to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. There might be some things that you had overlooked, or it might be a confirmation of what you're doing is on schedule. But I think what we'll do before we get into the Sam, we had a poll question lined up. There's a bunch of items here on these 12. It's probably helpful to understand where the audience is and on their particular journey, whether or not they've actually started and are going down the road or not. So are you able to launch that question, Sam, and we'll get some feedback right away at the front end here.
Sure. So, how far along are you on your MDR IVDR compliance journey? Are you overwhelmed and need help, not started and still packing your bags, in the beginning stages and left home but not very far, middle stages and working through it, or final stages and the end is in sight? So I'll give you a few moments to fill out your poll. I'm seeing a lot of people are in the middle stages so far.
Yeah, I would expect that to be where most of the audience is at.
Yeah, about 50%.
Okay, great. So yeah, if it's if you guys select not even started, that would be a little bit of concerning, but
there's about 9% of folks that still haven't started.
Okay.
All right.
Well, this will be really good for those people.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So yeah, there are a few of us that are overwhelmed and need help. Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad you're here. 9% not started, 22% are in the beginning stages, about just under 50% in the middle stages, and final stages are about 13%.
I think it's a pretty good reflection on what we actually, or I see where in the areas where I work, and then also hear from peers. It's nice to see that it's of course progressed a bit from looking at it a few years back, maybe 2 years back. Then more people are in the middle, more companies are in the middle stages. So that's great.
Yep. Well, we're going to work our way through those 12 steps, and I'm going to rely heavily on you, Tommy, to provide some of the conversation and technical information. A couple of these we can knock out pretty quickly. This first one about a pre-assessment, basically this particular step identifies and makes sure that you keep management in the loop. Very important that they know what's going on. I don't know if some companies put quarterly reports together, or perhaps even monthly, perhaps in some cases. But they really need to understand the requirements for MDR, IVDR, and make that fit into their business model. And in some cases, maybe those are the individuals that make financial decisions. There's obviously funding that needs to be connected to this activity, and staffing and resources and so on. But this is pretty high level. Just make sure management is tightly involved. They may not be on the team that meets daily, but they should be aware, and ideally they would be very supportive of the MDR implementation activities. The second step has to do with the gap analysis, and there's a number of checkpoints in actually over 2 pages here. And Tommy, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and work our way down through some of the details here on this particular chart.
Yeah, it actually from the commission side, the 12-step guide proved as a pretty good framework. I think most of you maybe already used it, or you can use it, and it's definitely a good starting point. And we will go through of course the 12 steps here, and then the part that I also had the opportunity to spend most time on, because I'm not an expert on all the detailed areas, but the initial gap analysis, and actually also getting back to point 1, as you mentioned, Gary, kind of like staffing and making sure that there is a certain focus on the IVDR and MDR implementation, and a good traction on this is very much based on the gap analysis you do or will be doing. And you can use that, of course, to highlight to management that there is a need for resources, there's a need to speed things up, and as you mentioned in the beginning, Gary, there might also be a need to kind of like look at the new timelines and make sure that you meet those, and yeah, the commission definitely keep us on our toes on these ones with for example the new deadlines for UDMIT. So on the point 8, the impact on your portfolio. So actually the devices you have, both as legacy devices in the world, and you want to keep them and you want to move them to become MDR or IVDR compliant. That's really important. So that's the step 1. How little, how much, and then of course with that portfolio in mind, then B is you're gonna check if those classification rules had an effect on you. And I know for example some of the IVDR, there's quite a few that moved from A to B, or maybe even further up, and that's where you actually need a notified body. And as we know, the IVDR recognized notified body that are approved now. Of course, it's definitely going in the right direction, but looking 2 years back, you couldn't really find that many. And maybe if you're a smaller manufacturer or producer, then it might be difficult to find one. So it's better now. That's a good thing. Then the confirmed conformity assessment and the route for the existing and future products. That's also, do you want to maybe change it? So we actually make sure that you follow the new definitions, or not change it, but make sure you follow the new definitions. And of course, as I mentioned, for the ones that maybe moved up to Class B under the IVDR, then of course there's an involvement for notified bodies that is should take place. Technical documentation, good place to start. Review what you have. Again, if you maybe were self-assessing and you were able to come by, you can definitely let's say meet a slightly bigger gap now that you were to speak with a notified body, and they of course want to get you up to a certain level of quality in your documentation. So great place to start. And I think the same goes with the QMS. I know manufacturers that comes with a, let's say, lower level kind of very simple structure of the QMS, and it might not even have the SOPs that kind of like document some of the requirements in the new regulations. So that's a really good place to start. You can do it in different ways, but of course highlight where there's changes to existing SOPs, and of course also try to line up where there's new SOPs needed. For example, for UDI, if you weren't selling in for example in the US before, then of course if you're on the European market, then UDI is new, and you more or less for sure don't have an existing SOP for UDI. So that's something and the same goes for traceability. It's been, the requirements and raising. So if you have a traceability sub or another sub that describes your traceability, then that's probably also an area that needs to be refreshed against the MDR and IVDR. I think you can skip to the next one, Jerry.
Okay.
Then something where the, let's say, the level also raised a bit. That's on both clinical level and evidence and risk management. And you can look into those two articles, and there is, I would say not for sure, but there's quite likely a gap that also should be notified there. Then for labeling, we will get a bit more into the point G, the labeling, a bit some of the details. We won't go through all the details of it, but new requirements coming also with you can see some of them in the Annex 1 and Chapter 3 for the MDR. But there's also updates to be done there on your devices, and a little also on your processes for sure. Post-market surveillance, also something that's was in another state under the MDD, and now it's definitely got a higher level of requirements, I would say. Even the post-market plan or under IVE, so we go for the clinical follow-up plan or the PMCF, then that part is definitely something where you both, as of course, describe it into your QMS, but you actually also need to find a structured way to do this over the span of the year. So you make sure that after you release, you do actually have a plan you follow for all your products or all your devices. And it's reoccurring work. It's not just done once. So you need to set up a smart way of doing this, or a system that can help you, notify you, and so on. We jump to J. Then for vigilance, we're all looking forward to that. It will be easier to submit vigilance, and I think it would be beneficial, traceability wise, for all in the value chain of devices, that there will be a better way to record this, an easier way to record it, hopefully in the end one place to report it, and that would be beneficial for the manufacturers. But nevertheless, there is a new way of reporting, and that one you need to make sure that you know the form of. As mentioned, I think I mentioned already traceability a bit earlier, but as part of the UDI. But of course, it's an article on its own, and you definitely need to follow a chapter on its own. Look into the traceability requirements. So that when you do that, it can encompass, of course, both looking into your systems. How do you track? Is there parts that you maybe didn't track before that you actually need to track right now? So it could be both let's say a paper exercise, but definitely also a systematic exercise to make sure that you have an adequate system there to follow your devices as they travel out in the world. So that was a lot of talking, but there's also some good bullets, I think, Gary.
Yeah, very good. I think you put in, let's go to the next page. You talked about labeling. We might want to revisit that. So these are, some points on the label. I'll just highlight a couple new ones there if you would like.
Yeah, as mentioned, for example, now we also even have in the harmonized standard the MD symbol given. So that's a good example. We have warnings that should be explicit in the language where we're selling our devices, and then there's both the UDI symbol that will be, if you have more barcodes, and or even if you don't only have one, you can make sure that you use the UDI symbol to emphasize where your UDI data is captured. And about capturing and presenting both the human readable plain text and the AID, or the automatic ID, or in this case the 2D barcode. I think this one uses the G10 standards. Is can be new to you. Hopefully you already know a bit about the G10 standard, but maybe you didn't include a serial number in the past, and that's of course where let's say a regulation like this can hit a bit harder, because again we're speaking about both processes and systems and updates to existing. This label, an example, but it looked like something that could be from a producer that produces a lot of similar devices, and you might have not just 100 but thousands of these labels that you want to or need to update. So it's definitely, I think, a detailed work depending on the systems that you have to work in, and it's something where you need to pay attention to the detail. So it can be more or less manual, but nevertheless it's something that needs to be done. And a lot of it can
Tommy,
be.
I was just going to say there, we've had talks to some clients, and it's a broad spectrum across some companies that have already been using, one of the accepted standards. GS1 is certainly the very most common one out there. So they, already have some identification on their products. They might have been using a barcode, and maybe there's just a minor change, if anything. But then at the other end of the spectrum, some companies that we talk to have been using their own kind of proprietary identifier, and the challenge is quite large to map the internal number that they've been using over to an acceptable standard. Let's say it's GS1, and get the device identifiers mapped, and then lo and behold, they don't have room on their label to put this barcode. Sometimes this, the one dimensional gets pretty long, so that comes back as a challenge. Like, how do I fit this on my label? And other companies use this particular event to say, you know what, let's switch over to two-dimensional. We're making a lot of other changes. Let's do it now. And then they have, in many cases, some technology change to make sure they can read that two-dimensional, have the scanner set up, and have it verified, and make sure it's printed correctly. But it does save a lot of space on the label.
Yeah, I think maybe this one. I think even maybe if I say, good case, maybe 70-80% of the manufacturers I work with has way little extra space, because this one there's extra space. Quite often there's more or less no extra space, so looking into labels as more or less individual templates or labels and do that gap analysis is so important. One of the things that I also come across is that maybe you use the GS1 G10, you use the 1D, but now you need to include or wish to include more information, and becomes longer, as you say. But then a transition into 2D is of course smart. I think we can all see that that's where we're heading also in retail and so on. It will definitely also come for more medical device manufacturers, even though it's not mandated. But then can everyone in your supply chain actually read that new smart 2D code that you now chosen to apply on? And that can be a pretty significant gap analysis on its own. So what seems smart and it's the right time to do it, might take a bit more time to actually implement.
Yeah, you definitely want to let your downstream, your supply chain all the way through to the end users be involved in that decision, or at least let them know the advanced knowledge about switching to two-dimensional. The nice thing about it is it's very dense. You can put a lot more information, even over and above what you would put in there for UDI identification.
Exactly.
All right, so I think we ought to move on to step number 3 here. This particular step is a little bit of a deeper dive into the quality management system. And I know you've had some experience there, Tommy, so why don't you talk a little bit about what are the challenges?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I think I can share some let's say generic examples I've seen, but just going through the three bullets that are in the proposal in 12 steps. So the review, are we up to speed with the current QMS as it looks today? So of course that goes for both MDR and IVDR, and I think as part of that gap analysis you did, this looking into the QMS should of course be a part of that, because that's where we listed, we think there's something here, there might be some clinical that we need to update, there was the labeling, the UDI and so on. And when that's done, of course, build the new regulatory requirements into the QMS, and then if you don't have it internally, then of course you need to find the person responsible for regulatory compliance. So if you find him, her internally, then of course there's a qualification and training needed for that responsible person. So those are some of the things. And then what I've seen, what happens if you, it could be now it's MDR and IVDR, but it could also be that you're preparing to, maybe enter the US market for the first time. What happens that could maybe be a bullet for is that you are a bit too fast track implementing, updating your QMS system with a new SOP, because you need to be UDI compliant under IVDR. Or you need to make sure that you follow the right post-market surveillance things. But what I like to add as a fourth bullet is that to leave a bit of time to actually see how those SOPs ripples out and our work. So the people your colleagues that work with them day to day, how can you keep them more or less pragmatic so they can work in a way similar to what they're done, or in the best case even smarter. That's definitely some of the things that is worth to notice. And then I think when you look at it, if depending on how smart how your QMS or EQMS is, then you might have references you need to update in it could be in under templates that's underneath or connecting to other SOPs. So I think quite often I've seen that it's probably, if you include the change of references, if you do that manually and have to do it, it's maybe 70-80% of the SOPs in your system that you need to brush up. There might be a little, some of them might be completely new, but it's I would say it's not just so. So I'm happy that the poll showed that there's a lot of you that.
Yeah, I did have a quick question, Tommy. From your experience, do companies enhance or use their existing quality management system, or do some companies, go out and buy a brand new system and start, fresh? Oh, hello? Sam, are you able to hear me? I think we lost Tommy's audio.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I do not hear Tommy. Do you hear Tommy?
I do not.
Let me do a quick check here.
Okay, now I don't know.
Oh, you're back.
I'm back. I hope everyone else could hear you, Gary. I just lost your sound. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we cannot hear your answer. I lost you where I asked the question. Do people use an existing system and they just add new content to it, or is this an opportunity? And what percentage of the companies put in a brand new QMS system?
I think I only seen putting in brand new if you kind of like more or less either you're not on the market yet with your product, so you can actually have lived without the official QMS, but you are maybe following or documenting it to some extent. Then of course the option now that you need more and you need to be able to show that you're in compliance. That's the only manufacturers I see where they use it to changes, because just doing the change or the update to your existing system is a big thing. And then if you upgrade, let's say, the technology behind it, I would say it's actually two projects I would prefer from a risk-based perspective to not to decouple.
And then I had one other quick question on this QMS. Are most of your clients switching over to the ISO standard and using that for their their framework?
I think now that there is also been we're aligning across the healthcare system, across the authorities across the world. So I think that's it's a good opportunity actually to look into the ISO standard and set it up towards that. But I haven't actually specifically thought of have you changed your point of view as such.
All right, very good. Why don't we move on? We have a couple more steps to knock out here, Tommy. Let's go to number 4. You have some information about the legal entities. There's a whole spectrum out there. There's European-based, there's non-European-based, there's brand owners, various contract manufacturers, and so on. There's a lot of different companies, and then doing business as is what they call it here in the U.S., where you might come buy out another company and so on. Oh, I don't hear you again.
I don't know.
Oh, there you're back.
You're back. I can hear you again, Gary. I'm so sorry. You posed a question?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask you to talk about the legal entities. How, that I don't think we have to develop this too far, but maybe just a couple words on, in the European Union, outside the European Union, subsidiaries and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think if we get back to point 3 with the QMS, then of course as a manufacturer, importer, or distributor, so different economic operators, you have different obligations, and of course that's in the details of the IVDR and the MDR. So of course you probably know, I hope, as a manufacturer what you are, but you could actually be in a lot of manufacturers are actually both importers and manufacturers, and they distribute devices from other manufacturers, and that actually puts in a few other steps that you need to make sure that you do implement into your QMS and start doing towards the manufacturer you're distributing. So that could be something we haven't thought about it. We have a QMS, we are a manufacturer ourselves. That's a pretty high level. But actually we have the obligation as a distributor as well, because we are distributing. We might be repacking or packing something together in a kit or similar, and then that poses some obligations that we just need to make sure that are described in our QMS. I think we have. And
then there is this reference to having insurance, product liability insurance, to cover your risk if you have a very high risk product, high volume. Anyway, there's a whole another little discussion about making sure that you have that in place. So I think what we'll move on to is number 5, and this gets into looking at your portfolio. A little bit more discussion here maybe about review of what you have. Do you want to toss some products out of your portfolio because of the cost? And have talked to a number of clients that had to make that hard decision where they would no longer provide a particular product because of the high bar of getting the MDR or IVDR compliance.
Yeah, exactly. It's I guess doing the proper steps in life cycle management of a medical device can be hard. And now, decisions on when to, stop manufacturing, stop supporting, and all those kind of things. And I think, especially for the manufacturers that were up classified, there's definitely some considerations that are worth taking. So you maybe, if you have a product, a legacy product you developed a while ago, maybe you don't think that it actually costs you that much to have it on the market. But of course, there's cost to maintain, inventory, your supply chain, and so on. There's a lot of different ways to calculate these, and I think it's a pretty good option to let's say have a reason to end life on some of your products if you do the calculation and it comes across that getting everything up to date with that gap analysis I did, and my technical documentation looked like this, and I probably need to get to this, then it might be too big an effort, and that effort could maybe use to develop something new or focus on something else. So it's very much getting back to also, what do we feed back to management? We've done our gap analysis. We looked at the portfolio, and we also now realize that there's a bit of work to do on our original documentation.
Yeah, that brings us. Oh, I was just going to say that brings us to the next step, where once you kind of figure out what stays in the portfolio, what comes out, how do you transition those particular products? Let's talk a little bit about the master implementation plan here.
Yeah. So of course depending on your size, this could be a project like this starting. I guess a lot of you listening in know that a project like this can be really time consuming and involves a lot of colleagues and stakeholders across the organization. So in order to do that, you definitely, hopefully most started with building a roadmap for the implementation. That included a lot of sub-projects, because a lot of it, something can be handled, by regulatory or within quality, QA, and a lot of it maybe has to be, some of it even has to be, IT development of something, so we can actually get the data to that UDI code that we were implementing. So there will definitely be a lot of sub-project, and I can definitely probably come up with some departments that I haven't worked with in an MDR implementation, but most of them will be involved in one way or the other. So if you want to steer that through in a good way, of course, involving a steering group that can take those decisions, like in point 5, to actually, stop-go decision for your older products or your legacy products. You need a setup where you can kind of like take those decisions and have that responsibility aligned. So yeah, good idea, of course, to look into the when your certificates expire. Look into, I think a bit later, Gary will get into the timeline. So what happens when, and can we live with that something expires and maybe we actually don't plan to renew it. That's something that's a strategy you can use, and then you just need to take the right decisions to start going on your master plan, and it's a lot of work in itself. Then I know a lot, and there's also a lot of good courses. There's a lot of things you can actually attend to train your colleagues, and that's very much important. So not just the person responsible, but everyone else in the organization that might need to do things in a bit different way, and they need new knowledge to do this. At a bare minimum, of course, new knowledge and training according to the updated SOPs. So that's some work in itself. I think this one has been discussed also a lot, at least in MedTech Europe, where I followed it a bit. That we were a bit afraid of the speed of getting new notified body acknowledged. And that's getting back to I think it was bullet 2 on the gap analysis. If you don't have a notified body today, maybe you were a class, maybe you upgraded to class B as an IVDR, then for sure you probably got in line of those one that were already acknowledged as a notified body under MDR and IVDR, and they had a lot of work internally, and they have a lot of work with existing customers, and they still have. So that's it's been an interesting discussion, and not just a discussion, but a lot of talking also on a commission and for example MedTech Europe level.
Yeah, there was this survey that was done back in early, about a year ago, I guess, roughly now. And it charted the workload that needed to be performed, which would be the upper line.
Yeah.
And then like the capacity number of notified bodies were stepping out of the business, or because of the MDR, all of them had to be redesignated. So the capacity actually went down, and there was huge gap here. So I think this is one of the driving forces that caused the commission to extend the life of legacy certificates, and that was always connected with the narrative that this was for the notified body to work off this backlog, not for industry to put the project on the shelf and not do anything in addition, not work on MDR implementation. So
that's a good point. It's I think it's still important to keep momentum where you have it. That's for sure.
All right. The next step, number 9 here, is work your way through the actual plan that was created earlier. So do you want to hit a couple of those, those sub projects? If you have any words of wisdom related to the clinical evaluation or the tech documents or something?
Yeah, I think for the technical document, I've seen some the technical documentation as a whole. I've seen different approaches, and then you asked, QMS wise, was it a good time to change, your structure and so on? And I think at least I came across a few that decided, now that we have something that looks like it has some gaps, our current technical documentation, then we might want to structure it in a new way, and of course add the or find, if we had it already but not maybe structured, the documentation actually needed to stay in compliance with the MDR and the IVDR. So that's, I think, I really hope a lot of companies did this because it's something that will help them going forward. And when we have the structure and you have the processes to follow, then it's something that can be beneficial, of course, for your coming projects and development work as well. And the same goes across when you do change management on the historical devices that you decided to keep under the MDR. So that's important. Then I think, for unique device identification, I think we already talked a bit through it. It's of course both the labeling, as we discussed, assigning the UDI, which in most cases I think most uses GS1 GTIN, but assigning and maintaining that is part of it. But then of course there's the data part as well. So you have a lot of UDI data which comes from across your organization that you want to set up a good way to handle. And how do you handle, let's say, regulatory master data and supply chain data and, let's say, development data? That's something that should be considered. For those steps, I think it's important that you, of course, have the UDAMED submission in mind. And we'll get a bit back to the timeline, Gary. It's as you mentioned, it's a really good point in time to discuss this. the data, if you look at point 3 below, UDAMED data submission, might go hand in hand with your data submission to Good ID on the FDA, for example, and maybe you're also preparing for some of the coming one for Saudi Arabia and so on, and you want a system that's adequate for handling these kind of operations to various countries. I think that's it looks simple. It might be, on the FDA it wasn't too many data attributes. It's definitely way more on the UDAMED, and some of them are even actually just to make the database react or act in the right way, so they're not as such data as we knew it from FDA. So it's new data sets that you need to have on top of your old data sets for the same devices, and you need to make sure that you have a way to actually distribute it, so make it operational. That's definitely cross-functional, as bullet 2 also says a bit about, to set it up, and then you also, of course, need to decide who is actually the accountable or responsible for this going forward.
Yep. We have in the past had much deeper dives into UDAMED topics, so and we don't have the time to fully develop that conversation today. But if you would like, you can when you download this information in the presentation, you can follow the link here and go to the RegTech and check out some of the webinars and resources that we have had there. You were talking about UDAMED, and I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the modules that are in UDAMED, and that kind of lays the groundwork for our timing. So everyone's probably very familiar with the 6 modules, the economic operator, the module for UDI and devices, dedicated one for certificates, clinical investigation and performance studies, which is turning out to be quite the challenge for the developers, and vigilance module and market surveillance module. So they are 6 total modules, and we'll talk a little bit later about the progress of each one of these. Noteworthy is information that is put into these modules is intended to be made public, which is significant change from the previous version of UDAMED under the directives where limited access. But we'll talk a little bit more about the development of these shortly on the timing. Let's go back and knock out the last couple of steps here pretty quickly.
Yeah, let's see if we can. Of course, if you start from scratch and you created your implementation plan and you're running your projects or various updates, then of course good project management practices to keep status and make sure you progress forward and eventually hit the bullets as you show there. That's important. Then of course getting involved with a notified body or your notified body, if you had one previously, is maybe that's even step 1, because at least 1 or 2 years back that was so important to kind of like get the phone conversation going with the notified bodies, and then of course. And I guess we can go to the active monitoring now also, because the implementation timeline moves, and it's not just a steady thing. So of course that's part of the European regulatory environment. That, for example, we now have UDAMED timelines, and I think to not waste too much time, we should jump a bit into the timelines, maybe, Gary.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good transition. Keeping an eye on the timelines, and sure enough, there's been an announcement just last week about a change to the timelines. So let's dive right into that. This particular timeline gets a little crowded, so I'm going to develop it as step by step, but it does reflect the current European Commission draft that came out on Friday of last week. Moved the the number or one of the modules quite a ways in the future, and that has a significant impact because the legal standing is that all 6 modules need to be functional before they can use them officially. Okay, so we have the time running from 2020 down now out to 2030. I keep extending this timeline to accommodate all the activity. And then we have the 2 dative applications already occurred. So on top of that, there are 3 modules currently up and running, all with voluntary submissions. I looked a couple weeks ago, and there's like over 200,000 devices reported in the UDI module. So that's and that's the production module. So that's up and running, and you can submit voluntarily to these modules. In addition to those 3, 2 of them, the market surveillance and the vigilant module, are the next 2 that are expected to come on board and allow voluntary submissions. Market surveillance perhaps at the end of this year, and then middle of next year for vigilance. And that completes a nice set of 5. The commission plans to do a audit on those 5. And that would allow them to be, robust, that has a little bit of validation connected to them. I believe they'll continue to run in voluntary mode. Meanwhile, the last module, this clinical investigation performance studies, has a lot of development effort, and you see the single line which reflects the development activity. So they're going to focus a huge amount of resources on putting this last module together. But look, that goes way out to the 3rd quarter of 2026 before that would become voluntary. Now, once all those 6 modules are available, the plan is to do an audit across all 6 modules. It's very short, 3 modules. Remember, the 5 have already been checked out. So it's probably just a matter of a quick check to make sure nothing has been broken. And then the last module, the clinical investigation, would be included. Following that audit, assuming it's all successful, we get the very important milestone. The European Commission puts this notice out that UniMed is fully functional. There's a 6-month delay. Let the dust settle, industry react, and then boom, at the end of that 6-month period, all these modules go mandatory. I will mention that the 2 modules, the UDI and the certificate modules, have like an 18-month transition plan built into the startup of those. So they become officially mandatory, but there's a period of time for you to make the submissions. In some cases, if you have to report a vigilance, you'll need to report right away. Now, this is the new draft timeline that the commission has put out. We'll wait and see if this becomes official, like final, or if there's any changes in the draft. So, again, this is one of the things you have to just keep monitoring. This rollout of UniMed affects a number of activities, number of reports that you have to do, the device registration, your economic operator registration, and so on. Now, you can certainly get that early and get your SRN and so on. Highly recommend that. But this has nothing to do with placing products on the market. The commission has an independent schedule for that particular timing. So let's do a quick review of that. If we were to start with medical devices, we have the medical device date of application, directive medical devices up to that point in time. And then if they're still placed on the market, there's legacy. I need to talk about 2 milestones. One is this red triangle, where on May 26th of next year, 2024, May 26th. Don't miss this date. By that date, you'll need to have your QMS installed. You have to have a basic UDI, DI assigned throughout your portfolio, and you must make a request to have a notified body evaluate your products. If you miss that date, then you can no longer qualify for placing your legacy devices on the market. So that's a very serious event. So there's a lot of activity between now and then to have that all happen. And then in September of next year, that actual agreement needs to be signed with the notified body to have them review it. Now, they may not start it right away, but the contract has to be in place. And that allows you then to continue to place your legacy devices all the way out the end of 2027 and 2028 for various classes. If you have class ones, they need to be self-certified back in 2021. So that hopefully you didn't miss that particular event, but then you are able to bring devices out on the market under the MDR. In some cases, class 2s and 3s, you'll need a notified body involvement. It's a very similar conversation for IVDs, but the timing is a little bit different. So the date of application is a year later, 2022, that have similar type of game plan for the directive IVDs and legacy IVDs. There was an amendment that gives a special accommodation for those products that did not have a certificate under the directive, but now they do under the IVDR. So they get an extra period of time before they need to comply. So that runs all the way out to 2027 for the least risky Class A sterile IVDs. And then even now you can work with a notified body and roll out your IVDs, and the self-certified had to be in place back in 2022. I know this is a lot of information. We'll let it settle. The last chart, I'll just real quickly mention that you'll need to have a game plan, because your legacy devices, and the example is medical devices, but for both IVDs and medical devices, there's a deadline out here. You're going to hit an end of life. So at some point, you'll need to convert that to a medical device, regulatory compliant device, either an equivalent or a substitute. And depending on when you can schedule that activity and when you're prepared, the timing could slide, but you don't want to ever be in a position where you're not able to put a product out on the market. Meaning, you've reached the end of the time period for your legacy product and you have not yet received a certificate for your MDR compliance. So certainly want to avoid that. I see the time. Let's quickly talk about a couple lessons learned. Tommy and I collected some thoughts, and one of the recommendations and practices is to think globally, not necessarily a point solution for Europe, but certainly for those companies that have global markets, you want to have a solution that is able to accommodate all the regions that you market your products in. And then there's some recommendation here to start early and watch for updates. Without a doubt, you can go ahead and register your company in the actor module and receive a single registration number. You should be well along with your engagement with your notified body. And I once again emphasize this May 26th date. Don't miss that date, or it'll have serious ramifications. The other recommendation is to prepare that infrastructure and data. Some of this activity takes a long time. If you use an existing product and just add a little bit of enhancements, not too bad. But if you're structuring and moving to a new system, new master data management system or something, that could take quite a while. The other point that I'll quickly mention here is that once again, there's another delay, and there's a temptation to put the project back on the put the project back on the shelf and walk away from it. But you very well could miss that very important critical date that we talked about. And the a couple other points here about keeping the momentum, creating these resources going forward, and not to procrastinate, and make sure that this product gets moved along. The last one I'll emphasize here is there's good reason to move forward and make voluntary submissions for a number of these reasons, but it's wise to prepare for early UDMED use. And what we mean by that is that there may be some competent authorities in Europe. Actually, already I'm aware of Ireland. HPRA has recommended that you make voluntary submissions into UDMED rather than use their national repository. If you are aware of some other health authorities, competent authorities, please send them our way. We'd like to keep a collection of these and keep everyone informed. But there might also be those parties in the supply chain, like a distributor or end user, hospital or so on, that wants to have this data in UDMED and have that extra level of data checking and validation connected to it. And then there's also health authorities outside Europe that many times they'll look to a European Union CE mark, and so they obviously want a current version of that, making use of the MDR. So there's good reasons to continue along with your project and prepare for early use. I think this 3-year delay is probably going to force some of these additional competent authorities into be in a position where they would recommend that you use that. Sam, let's real quickly run this poll, asking the audience about what particular topics they would like to see next.
Sure. So what MDR, IVDR topics would you like to learn more about? Please check all that apply. This will inform our next presentation. I'll give you a few moments, and we are over. I will just let people know that if you have asked a question, all the questions are going to go to our presenters and will be responded to. Okay, just a few more moments.
A lot of good topics there on your list, Sam.
I know. I'm excited.
And we just didn't have time to dive into anything real deeply here today.
So it looks like the bulk of the audience would like to know more about the governance of the device or UDI data set, but then that's closely followed by gap analysis and project management. Okay,
very good. I think with that, we probably ought to wrap up. And again, we can do these live questions, well, post event questions and get back to people. And maybe that's part of the next webinar, is we take some of these frequently asked questions and cover them.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea, way to do it, Gary.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, do you want to just wrap up for more contact information?
Sure. Here's how you can get a hold of us and me, our website information. All of this will be in the PowerPoint that we send out following, or the PDF. You can follow us on our Twitter and LinkedIn. And then for Tommy, here are all of his contact information, including his LinkedIn and website. So you'll have access to this after this presentation. So please do reach out. Again, we will respond to your questions. in due time. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy, and thanks for those in the audience for attending. Good turnout.
All right, bye everybody.